Welcome to the third in our Inspired Live series. Following the success of the first two, firstly we had AI and then networking, we are delighted to bring you a discussion on gender equity in the workplace for this year's International Women's Day. If you haven't already heard, the theme for this International Women's Day is Inspire Inclusion, and we are hoping to do just that with this conversation. We will be taking stock of some of the most inspiring initiatives of the moment, looking at how organisations can invest more in gender equity and why that's so important, and discussing how companies' biggest asset, their staff, can make further change happen by influencing upwards to senior leadership teams and boards. For those of you who don't already know, I'm Abigail Barclay, the Search Director here at Inspired. I run our Executive Search division, and for last year's International Women's Day, I wrote and published a white paper on women in leadership within UK publishing. That led us at Inspired to have some fascinating, eye-opening and hopeful conversations with a range of people, including the two wonderful panellists that I am thrilled to be joined by today for our discussion, How to Take Stock and Invest in Gender Equity. Let me introduce you to our fabulous panelists, Laura Meyer, CIO, Angel Investor and Advisor, and Jan Manzuchan-Mander, the Head of Operations at The Flip. Jan is Senior Marketing Manager at John Murray Press, Hachette UK, and the Head of Operations for The Flip, a non-profit platform that aims, and I would add succeeds, to inspire people in publishing. Driven by a commitment to intersectionality, diversity and transparency, The Flip helps to empower future leaders and facilitate important discussions, whilst working with a range of industry bodies such as the IPG, the Bookseller, the Publishers Association, the Women's Prize Trust, and we are delighted to say Inspired. Jan was also the co-chair of Elevate, HarperCollins' Bain network, as well as being SYP London's treasurer between 2019 and 2022. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you so much. So good to be here.
Thank you. Laura has over 3 decades of invaluable experience in the world of technology and operations, with a particular focus on leading media industries through change and growth. As Senior Vice President, Technology and Operations for Turner Broadcasting, Warner Discovery, Laura was involved in the launch of multiple TV channels, headed due diligence for numerous acquisitions, and led a large team of across 10 departments. As Chief Information Officer at HarperCollins UK, Laura played an instrumental role above and beyond her day job, ensuring that HarperCollins was independently certified as carbon neutral. She co-founded HarperCollins' Menopause at Work network 5 years ago. HarperCollins was among the first non-government organisations to sign the Menopause in the Workplace Pledge, and Laura was key in creating the company's menopause policy. Additionally, Laura was co-founding member of the Women's Cross-Sector Mentoring Group WING in order to champion the advancement of women across various industries. Now, as well as an advisor, Laura is a passionate believer and investor in female entrepreneurship, seeking to elevate the profile of female investors in the commercial world. Thank you for being with us, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
I'm sure that you'll agree these are two people that we want to hear from. So let's go ahead and hear from them. As I said, the theme of this year's International Women's Day is Inspire Inclusion. So let's start with the positives. What inclusive initiatives are you most inspired by right now? Laura, can we start with you?
Sure, thank you, Abigail. So I would say well-being of women are doing incredible work. They're doing various campaigns, Just a Period, Let's Chat Menopause, and the Health Collective. Now, Professor Dame Leslie Regan, who's the chair of Wellbeing of Women, she also does government work. She made such a valid point that the health service was designed by men for men. Women have been an afterthought, and her role is trying to reset that. Really powerful work that she's doing. She wants to ensure that diverse women's voices are heard and that can influence government policy via the Women's Health Strategy. So absolutely crucial. Also, 55 Redefined. They're an organisation that are trying to campaign against age diversity, which happens all the time now. Positivity and inclusion across all areas of life. So a great organisation that's headed by women. WIT, I'd like to say, Women in Technology.
Yeah.
They do an awful lot of fabulous work and do lots of guides on various topics, including, how cultural stereotypes impact women's interest in tech. And I'll probably come on to talk a little bit more about that later. So there's some things that are inspiring me.
Amazing. It's amazing. Jan, what would you like to add?
I think when I look across the publishing industry, something that really strikes me as being a common thread in all of the things that I find really inspiring, and they are so unapologetically mission-led. So the work of Knights of, they're not necessarily an initiative, but they have such a purpose, and it was born out of this desire to see representation on the bookshelves for children and young adults. Things like the Black Writers Guild that represent and advocate for a fair and sustainable environment for Black talent within the publishing industry. Again, it was born from a need to get the attention of key stakeholders to ensure that those systemic inequalities are acknowledged and tackled. And when I think about when I was trying to get into the industry, places like Creative Access were so wonderful because they really could signpost the right direction. And now that I've been here for a few years, I'm always so blown away by the courage and the creativity of network groups, both within companies and across the industry as a whole. So East and Southeast Asian Publishing Network, Trans Publishing Network, places like Elevate, Thrive, Colourful, they are so brave, and there's such an impact that they can have. And it's all about that moment where someone tries to take control of their narrative and also to advocate for more than just themselves, that I'll always find really inspiring.
I would wholeheartedly add the flip to that list.
Thank you.
Do you want just to tell the audience, for anyone that hasn't had the pleasure of coming across the flip yet, a little bit about what you do? Because I know it's something that we're really inspired by.
Well, thank you so much. So the Flip was founded by 3 women who worked at PRH, and in its current form, so myself, Cassie and Omara, we took over at the beginning of 2022. And the idea is that there are so many things, so many pearls of wisdom that people acquire as they progress in their careers. And we wanted to be able to be a conduit for that kind of bravery and that vulnerability in many ways, because a lot of the things that come up again and again around mental health and well-being at work and balancing work life, all of those things. But I think there's something about someone who's done it before telling you their experiences that really does make it feel like, oh, actually, yeah, things will be okay. So we have interviews with female leaders across the industry, and one of the reasons for that is because if we look at a lot of the difference between the industry as a whole and then people who are at board level or more senior level, there is that notable absence of diversity and representation. And so we have these interviews. They're really, really wonderful. I really suggest people check them out. And also we have a newsletter that comes out that aims to give you the publishing behind the paywall. So all of the things that we found interesting, kind of to add a little bit more light-heartedness to what we do. And we're also really excited to be hosting our first event on the 27th of March, which is all about the survey that we recently launched in partnership with the Bookseller and the Women's Prize. But I'll talk more about that later.
Lovely. You touched upon something really crucial there, Jan, which is the purpose behind the Flip, that there is still a lot of work to be done for greater gender equity, which is the focus of today's conversation, but more widely diversity, particularly at the leadership level. And I think for anyone that hasn't read the interviews, I think you've had such honesty and transparency from the people that have contributed that has just made it, the whole journey seems that bit more accessible. But I think that touches upon kind of the reason for greater investment in gender equity, that that there is a gap there. Laura, is there anything else you wanted to add on this? Kind of why do we need to still invest more in gender equity?
And I think we've spoken before, Abigail, about getting real. Why?
Yeah.
Why is it still so necessary to invest in gender equity?
Yeah.
And I think getting real, it's because these conversations keep on happening. And why? It's because something isn't working.
Yeah.
And there is still inequality. And if you look at the world, it's whether it's uneven access to education, lack of political representation, access to healthcare, is still happening. And, you know, I was thinking a little bit about this, and I did post on this, but I've got it here next to me. This is a great book. Can you see it? Normal Women.
Oh yeah, I've got it. I haven't opened it yet.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get it for Christmas.
Philippa
Yeah.
Gregory, and in the inside bit, she said something that really resonated with me, and I did post on it. But she said it is not, and it cannot be, a celebration of women's rise, because women are still not yet equal. And here we are in 2024 and still having those conversations. So that's why we have to carry on doing it.
Yeah. Jan, is there anything you wanted to add there?
I think it's such a good point that you've raised, Laura, because sometimes when we're at events and we're speaking to people, we'll introduce ourselves and we'll say what we're doing and who we are, and we'll say, we're female leadership and publishing. And there have been occasions where maybe a man has asked what we do and they just kind of clock out. And it does enrage me a little bit, because I kind of think, hang on, you work in an industry that is predominantly women. If you manage a woman, if you work alongside one, if you're managed by one, just, it's not just about the fact that it makes it better for women, it's the fact that it will make it better for everyone. And so that's why, for me, I think it's so important to keep that intersectionality in mind, because the way that the world shifts is so quick right now, that the investment is needed to make sure it's long lasting and it will continue to make positive change, even if the parameters of what we're dealing with are shifting constantly. So that's probably my biggest pet peeve.
The sustainable change. When I mentioned the white paper that I published for last year's International Women's Day, I think when we looked at the stats for that, in an industry where 60% was over 60% women, I think. In some organisations, we're up to 70 at the board level. It's not. It's different. In some cases, it is 50-50, and so while it looks equal, that doesn't necessarily translate to equity, because it's not representative of the wider workforce. And I think, in publishing, I think that's one of the biggest reasons. But thank you, Laura, for bringing out the other sectors and what's happening in the wider world there. You mentioned the health sector at the beginning, and I think that's really important for us to be aware that things around us systemically are designed without gender equity in mind necessarily. So there's a huge need and purpose and drive for us to invest more. Laura, your experience with investing actually is quite tactile and quite real, isn't it? You've got quite direct involvement when it comes with gender equity. Do you want to share with us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So I'm a member of Angel Academy. So Angel Academy invests in tech startups where there is at least one female founder on the board. And it was founded by Sarah Turner to try and close that gender gap and to focus on gender equality. It's one of the most active angel networks that there are in the UK, and it addresses this lack of investment going to female founders. It is unbelievable that it's only about 3% of investment goes to all women startups, all women businesses, compared to 85% that goes to all men, and the bit in between is for both. So when I first found out that stuff, I couldn't believe it. That still, it's one of still the industries, VC industry, that whole industry of investment, that it's so biased towards men. So Angel Academy does this incredible work of shining a light on women and female startups. And they've invested in over the 10 years since they've been going, 49 female startups have had investment with over 100 funding rounds. So I can't tell you how many, some of the amazing female founders that I've met and what they've created, what they're still creating, they're incredible. And it's really, really challenging to be able to do your own business from scratch and to go through trying to get funding and to build something. And for anybody, listening, I would say, look at somebody like Anne O'Neill. She's co-founder of Adora Digital Health, what they're doing. So it's so important right now. Or Dr. Mary Ellis, who's co-founder of Ferricin, which reduces the use of pesticides in crops. These women are doing incredible work. It's so important. So I'm really proud that I'm involved in that. And it's something that has to improve. It has to change. And we have to get more money to female-founded businesses.
It just sounds like the most empowering environment that you can imagine, you know, women investing in more women to do great things. I know the three of us have talked a little bit before about the quote of kind of leaving the ladder down behind you.
Totally.
And not bringing it up, and I think that is just a very kind of tangible, practical example of that.
Yes.
No.
And it's there's also men who are members of Angel Academy. It's about 70% women who are members and who do the investments. But as I say, you have to have at least one female founder on the board, and it's really the only network that does that. So it's incredible, the work that happens. And as I say, there's incredible female entrepreneurs out there. I was blown away by I have been blown away by some of the things I've seen, and some of the things that are still happening. You know,
the brains and the bravery, all of it.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
because it takes
goosebumps,
guts, and sheer determination and hard work, and it's incredible.
Thank you for sharing that. I think we're all feeling suitably inspired. Let's think about some of the investment that organisations can make in gender equity then. What are some of the examples of business initiatives or cases of businesses taking more time or money to invest more in gender equity that you've seen that have been particularly successful? Jan?
I think for me, it's really about when you give people the space to see themselves in the future, and also when they look around. I think mentoring can be such an important part of doing that, because if I look around and I can't see someone who looks like me, who is in a position maybe a few rungs above me, or who is on the very peak of their career, then what I'm unconsciously taking in is that this place will not invest in me in the long term for me to make it up there. And I think that's particularly the case for women of colour and people who exist in those marginalised spaces. So I think it is about really making sure that you have a good mentoring program, that you are pairing up the right mentor with the mentee, that you're giving your mentors, your managers, the tools that they need to properly support their staff, not only in terms of their development, but also mental health, well-being, all of those things. And I think as well, it is about acknowledging that there is an issue. You can't just bury your head in the sand. Why is it that so many, as you said, Abigail, in the white paper, so many women leave? There's such a drive to, hire diverse talent at the junior level, but that doesn't then feed through. What is it that's wrong? Try and find the gap, try and find the leak, and then work at it from the ground up, and also listen to the people who are there. If they're telling you something, probably because they have a lived experience. And I appreciate that a lot of these things are really hard to organize on like a grand scale, especially within a large company. But I think as long as people feel like they're being heard and they're being respected, that in and of itself will really go a long way.
Absolutely. Be open to feedback as well, being open to feedback from everyone. Laura, you're nodding away.
So, Abigail, you said about, or have there been initiatives that have been involved in? And if I think back through my career, I think one that is a real standout for me was when I was at Time Warner, so Warner Discovery now. I participated in a women's leadership program. So it was women from across all the group companies, so Warner Brothers, Turner, HBO, Time, for example. They all came together across the globe, and we all met in New York for a week. And it was a proper investment that had been done, including the participation of the chair of Time Warner. They used their time to come along. It was external companies giving training, proper discussion, proper feedback. And it was just one of the most powerful initiatives that I've participated in. And we had to return to our workplaces, and we had to follow through on the things that we'd discussed. We'd made plans all sorts of stuff, and there was real accountability. And I think sometimes that doesn't always happen. So that was what was really powerful for me. And I think what Jan was saying about mentoring, so important, you know, to find somebody that can help you, find somebody just who can give you advice and will tell you the unspoken rules, because you know what, every organisation has them. And be open about things that haven't worked for yourself. I always try and say, well, I did this, I did it wrong, this worked, this doesn't, you know, and think about things this way, you know, think about what your next move is, wherever it is. You shouldn't be just trying to maintain people in a company. You should also be thinking about them and what's best for them and what they can do in their wider career. And I think that's, you know,
we're hiring
so
people
important.
at the end of the day, right, with real lives, with real feelings,
real
and real
lives,
emotions.
people. And that's
be respectful of that.
Center,
I think what's interesting about this discussion is that, you know, there's various initiatives and policies you can put into place. Mentoring, we've spoken about a few times here, but the policies themselves, you know, menopause policies, parental leave policies, flexible working policies. We can talk about, you know, the way that you recruit and the way that you develop staff with, you know, appraisal processes. I think there's all sorts of things you can do along all sorts of touch points to create or to invest time and money into gender equity that don't necessarily need to be hugely expensive either. But what's coming loud and clear from both of you here is that it's all very well having them, but what's been most successful, what's been the key to success, in other words, to these is the culture around it. So Laura, you touched upon the accountability, people allowing themselves to be accountable, opening themselves up and then allowing themselves to be accountable for whether change was going to happen afterwards or not. And Jan, you mentioned the openness and the willingness to receive feedback and to listen to people at all levels of the business. So I think it's what's becoming quite clear here is that having the culture around that is what makes a difference, and that's quite hard to create, right? So let's talk a bit about that, if we can. Thinking about inclusive cultures, let's take it back. We've talked about kind of how some of the systemic ways that you might create one, but let's take it back a step. At the beginning, how would you define an inclusive culture, Laura?
So I think we start with saying that culture is everything, right? It's so important. And it's about meaningful work. It's about the core values. It's about communication. I think it's about everyone feeling they can thrive and not just selected people. It's somewhere where everyone can contribute and feel part of an organisation, not just as an observer to others, because others are the ones who are listened to. So, Jan, you touched on about being listened to, and that is so important. And representation is also vital. If you can see it, you can be it. And I did some research recently for an organisation about women don't go into a particular tech job, actually. And I spoke to about 10 different companies. And it was incredible, some of the same things coming through, why women weren't going into them. And culture is definitely part of it. So language being used in the workplace, perhaps.
Okay.
Also language being used or things with job adverts, job interview processes being outdated, poor quality job descriptions that hadn't evolved. So there's so many things that haven't shifted over a long time, and things where if people listen to what's going on, to what people are saying, that is so key. And people want to work in places where they feel they can thrive and that they feel that the culture is a good one. And that's so important.
I think the whole language piece is you've hit the nail on the head there. And it's for us in the industry of publishing, we make a business out of getting language right. So let's kind of show up for ourselves and get it right in our workplaces as well. Not talking about right-hand men or chairmen or it's it's some very obvious things we can do to increase inclusivity. Jan, do you want to build on what we've just been talking about there?
I think for me, I 100% agree with everything Laura said. And I think there's often a perception that in order for a culture to be inclusive, people have to bring 100% of themselves to work. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it should be that they can bring as much of themselves to work as they want to. There's no need to fit into a box or to act up or perform in a certain way, where people can understand that there is a time and a place for safe spaces, for inclusive spaces, and for allyship. And I think when I think about, you know, my career and the spaces that I've existed in, it's always been with that understanding that, yes, I might not agree with everyone, and yes, I might not find everyone like that easy to work with, but I am always respected at the end of the day. And so I think that's one of the main things that I would say about an inclusive culture, is that it's feeling comfortable to bring as much of yourself to work as possible, as you feel able on any given day, because obviously it can change, but that you don't have to do it all the time and 100%.
And that there are spaces where you might want to bring, you know, like we were talking about, very safe spaces, allyship. There might be networking groups that, you know, that you want to talk about things with certain groups of people, and then slightly more wider networking groups with a wider range of people that you might want to address on a higher level things, but bring less of yourself to. And it's having the choice to be
exactly
how much of yourself that you want.
Exactly.
Lovely.
And you know, Abigail, when the paper that you wrote, and we have discussed it, that you made this really fantastic observation about how soft skills, if you like, were always aligned to more to women, and how you've renamed them power skills. And I think that was really a great thing to do, because they are powerful skills.
Yeah, they are. There's nothing soft about collaboration, inspiration, motivation, nurturing. You know, that's what companies need in order to be sustainable and for sustainable growth. So, and that, when you're talking there about job descriptions and recruitment processes and appraisal forms and things like that, it's having those as being accountable for as well. I think, you know, let's talk about examples where you've shown these power skills, not just the numbers and the goals. And I think those, when you start celebrating behaviours, that levels the playing field. So anyone of any gender can display those skills.
Exactly.
And you know, so it's about the skills and the experiences that are driving the business forward, not what that looks like in a profile. Jan, we've talked about kind of what businesses can do and senior leaderships can do to create more inclusive framework and the systemic policies, etc., that can be put in place. But we've also touched upon a few times, you know, the importance of listening to the entire workforce. And I think I just want to unpack that a bit more, because it's so important. Can you tell us, share with us your experience of influencing up to senior leadership teams and boards?
I think I really would preface this by saying that influencing up is work. It is a sort of activism, and it should be treated as such. And if you're in a position of being someone who's from an underrepresented voice within a space, then it is emotional labor as well on your part. So for me, one of the biggest learnings was that I needed to take stock of what it was that I wanted to achieve, but also know when actually I could repeat things so many times, and whether or not it landed well was not my responsibility. But I do think that in terms of being able to get things across, there's two things that I found really helpful, and it's good to try and do these two things at the same time, which is that you need to present your pitch with data and solutions. So I think a lot of people on SLT and on boards are very time poor, and they have a lot of, you know, different things pulling their attention. And so I think it is about trying to make it easy for them to agree. And so on a basic level, trying to understand what it is that makes, you know, that particular individual really value their work, and then connecting to that. And okay, yes, often it is the bottom line, but in a personal context, what are their values? What are their particular strengths? What do they really see as being their contribution? And I think try and shift your explanation to that particular context. So in my experience when I was co-chair at Elevate, we knew that we had to speak to a particular value. And so we wanted to show the impact that our network and our committee had, not only in terms of the data of this is what our social media platform can do in terms of reach and brand awareness for diverse voices that we publish, but also here are the testimonials from people who have now left the company and left Elevate, but still see it as such an important part of their growth and their time within the industry. And in terms of our work at the Flip, I think that's even more essential because we've just, as I said, we've just finished our first ever survey. And one of the reasons we really wanted to do that is because we know that there are these things that keep popping up again and again, but we didn't really have any quantitative data to back it up and to kind of get the people in the decision-making seats of power to sit up and to pay attention. And so the data has now come in, and it's really, really honest and eye-opening temperature check on what it's like to work in the publishing industry. And I think the idea is that we're going to use this data as a way to talk about the solutions. So a lot of the feedback we got in the survey was, I'd really like to see different styles of leadership modeled, and also could we please talk about parental leave? And so we're having two separate panels at this event where we're not only presenting the results of our survey, but also we're having a panel on the second shift and balancing working within the industry with parental and caring responsibilities, and then also one on future leaders within the sector and kind of how they see the industry as kind of growing and developing. And I think just to come back to the first point that I made, the Flip are a non-profit platform. We're volunteers, we have full-time jobs. And so it was about making sure that we kept to our core values and we set those goals up, but we're aware of our limitations. So we made sure that we tried to make it as accessible as possible. But as we said, we are volunteers and we don't run for profit. So trying to do as much as we can with other organisations who can help us amplify our messaging and, you know, get the word out there. So yes, if you're in London on the 27th of March, we're going to have a nice networking event. It's at the News Building. And yes, really, really excited to see what kind of discussion and solutions come from that space.
Can't wait to get that in your diaries, everybody. I think that your 2 points there, as you say, go hand in hand, and it's about focus. It's about knowing, as you say, kind of taking stock of what you want to achieve out of it, and going with that as a focus with the data to whoever you think can help you make the change happen. And hopefully kind of going through that and using some of the language that you think is going to land well with the SLT or with the board is a helpful exercise in and of itself, that you're starting to think like then. That's helping your growth mindset of what you can do and how you can develop and how you can think. But as you say, you're kind of putting boundaries in place so that it's for yourself, so that you don't kind of get completely drained by it is probably quite helpful. And that's where networks can help, and cheering each other on and finding champions and advocates, whether it's individuals or organizations. So huge congratulations for everything you're all doing. Laura, Ian, you've held very senior positions in a variety of places. Have you got any advice for Jan or other listeners of how you think it could be helpful for them to come to boards with ideas about new initiatives or feedback?
We've talked about a healthy culture, and that's about creating a great place to work. So it is vital that leadership teams are determined to do that. Otherwise, it's very hard or perhaps impossible. So talking on Jan's point, keep talking about stuff, keep asking the questions, keep sharing the data. Really excellent point on that. If you're doing credible research on something, it can't be ignored, or it shouldn't be ignored. And if it's something that can't be actioned, look, things happen in companies as well. Let's be realistic. That say a company is looking at an acquisition of something, can't speak about it because it's confidential, it's NDA'd. So something can't happen. But people can be honest about something's, we're looking at something at the moment, we can't do that right now, we'll come back to you. So it's important that things are explained. If something can't be said in a transparent way, then just say something's going on at the moment. We will come back to you, but we're not ignoring you.
Yeah.
If that's not the case, at least explain in a transparent and honest way. We can't do that because of this, or we don't want to do that because of this, or something. But don't just sort of, yeah, that was great, and then you never hear anything. You know, because I think that's frustrating for people. Yeah. And I think you can show how your objectives of what you're trying to do, how they align with the company ones. And ask senior leaders as well to participate in problem solving. If there's a particular issue, like Jan, you're talking about things that have come up with your research with the flip, ask senior leaders to get involved in problem solving on some of those. Why not? Because this is what people are talking about. So come and join in and help us resolve or problem solve. Help us do that. Yeah. And cost benefit analysis, including risks, always so important. And Jan made an excellent point on bring a solution as well. You know, that's always great. This is the issue. We've come up with a solution. What's not to like? So
fabulous. We have talked a lot about how organisations can support this a more inclusive culture, particularly around gender equity. How can we invest in ourselves? How can we invest in ourselves to develop, become ambassadors of inclusivity, to become ambassadors of gender equity, to increase gender equity? Laura?
You know, something that I've found is that you have to find your ikigai. So it's your raison d'etre, whatever that is. It's what brings you joy. I think it's important to try and find what brings you joy, what inspires you, what can you do, or what do you find that is purposeful for you. Purpose is so important in life, and it can be anything that brings you purpose. At different stages of your life, different things give you purpose. It might be getting a house, it might be moving a country, it might be finding a partner, it can be all sorts of things. It might be getting that new job. Find something that's purposeful for you, because life is so much about purpose. But also training, networking, we've talked a lot about that, learning, you know, all the different ways that you can do that. And Jan made a very important point about the flip and your volunteers, you know, all the different things you can do as a volunteer that do bring you some joy. I used to do work for Business Action on Homelessness, part of Business in the Community, bringing homeless people into the workplace to help understand about work and to help people get jobs. And that gave me enormous purpose because it changed people's lives. And that's so important. So it's finding those things that you think, and sometimes I've had somebody say to me in the past, well, you know, it's only worth doing things if you can make massive change. That's not true. One person can make one small change to somebody, whether it's just taking the time to have a conversation, ask them how they're feeling, suggesting something to them, listening so important. So how is your day? You know, that's so important. So we can all make small changes and we can all do small things for each other. And that is so important. And, you know, if people think, well, somebody took the time to do that for me or to help me with something, then, and that is purpose as well. And that's investing, because it's investing in yourself to listen to somebody, and it's investing in somebody else trying to do something for them.
I love it. And to add to that, kind of taking time to celebrate other people and champion them and tell them they've done a great job at something, you know, that's investing in the relationship. You feel good for it, they're left feeling good, and it's, you know, you're starting a cycle of good empowered feeling. Thank you. I've got more goosebumps after that, Laura. Thank you very much. Laura, Jan.
I think it is that ripple effect, really, isn't it? It's that one person who, it's a tiny thing, it's one conversation, it's one, oh, well done, you did really good on that presentation, when someone was feeling anxious about it. I think that can be so vital, because one of the things I've really learned this year is how important it is to surround yourself with people who do fill your cup, but also to find those people who challenge you, and who will be honest with you without being cruel, and who care about you enough to tell you the truth. And that can be quite hard. I think especially in, a society where women in particular and people from marginalized communities are told in order to succeed they have to behave in a certain way, it can be really difficult to find a space that you feel comfortable to inhabit. But the thing that I've really learned is that it's just not selfish to set those boundaries and to put yourself first. And I think it's very different for different people in different spheres of their life, but especially in the world of work, it does sometimes feel like if you put yourself first, if you ask for what you want, that is somehow being greedy or being unreasonable. And actually, I don't think, especially for men and women, I don't think being unreasonable is something that is bad for anyone to do. But I've never heard of a man being called bossy. And I've always, I've just never heard that being said as though it's a negative thing. So I think, for me,
that goes
it
back
really
to our
looked,
language conversation.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just ingrained in us. I have to check myself with my kids as well. I've got a boy and a girl. I have to check myself with my not describing her as bossy. But, she demonstrates very strong leadership skills from an early age. I think is the way to describe her. And so, kind of talking about inside work there, Jan, what about outside of work? What else can we do to inspire a more inclusive culture in the wider world?
So I think I touched on this earlier, but I think there is a difference between safe spaces, inclusive spaces, and allyship. And I think for me, one of the real things that I've learnt is that a safe space should always be for the people that it's aiming to help. It's a space for them to heal and to connect and to grow. And inclusive spaces are a space for discussion and learning. So I would hopefully put the flip into that. But where people from lots of different backgrounds can come together and be challenged and also be educated. And then allyship is that kind of one step further, where you start to move into spaces where maybe those conversations hadn't been had, and you're doing those in order to make them an inclusive space for other people. And I think one of the things that I've really noticed is that when someone points out a systemic injustice to you that you weren't previously aware of that impacts them, it's so easy to react defensively or to start to self-flagellate and think, why is it that I didn't know about this before? But when you're constantly talking to yourself in that really negative way, what actually happens is that you don't have the headspace to center the individual and what they've just told you and to take that into account. And I think it's really important then. There's a great quote from Saima Aslam, who we interviewed at the Flip, about certain communities being hard to reach, but how actually she frames it as being easier to ignore. And I think in a lot of conversations that are happening now, I see it as like certain people are just more comfortable to dismiss. And so it is that sense with allyship of actively turning towards the discomfort and knowing that by doing so, you are not only kind of investing in your understanding of the world, but you're also helping to bring together all these different threads that make our society so wonderful and so inclusive. So yeah, that is for me why it's so important.
Thank you. Laura?
I think, we've talked about it, mentoring, so important, learning, asking questions, speaking up, going to events, educating yourself, listening to different perspectives. And going back to the mentoring piece, you can't always be somebody's mentor. You might get asked a lot, but because you might have a lot of people you are mentoring, but I'm always prepared to give somebody some time. So somebody reached out to me recently on LinkedIn. It's like, I'm doing so many things, can't add another mentor as in seeing somebody regularly, but I'll give you an hour. And in an hour, you can actually achieve a lot. Tell me what you're thinking. Here's some feedback. Here's some organizations you can look at that you might never have heard of because you're trying to start something or whatever. So it's about, you can really inspire a different culture if you behave in a certain way, I think. And we've touched on it, about being kind, about being respectful, about listening, and about helping other people. You know, I think it's always something that I've tried to do and I'll continue to do, because I think that's what makes the world go round. And we've all got to help each other, especially women, because it has been hard before. It's never been made easy. So we have to help each other. And that's I think one of the main things that's important to me about that culture of, you know, help each other, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and help each other.
Yeah.
Even if it's, you can have one conversation with somebody, you can still help, and also equally you learn so much as well, which is fantastic.
Pays to be kind, absolutely. Well, what a beautiful note to end on. Kindness making the world go round. Thank you so much, both of you, for an enlightening discussion. I've learned a lot. I'm sure everyone watching will learn a lot as well. Really appreciate the honesty that you've given us today, as well as so much food for thought. And to everyone watching, happy International Women's Day. I hope this has given you a chance to to take stock of what's happening, of why there's more work to be done. We've talked about taking stock of what we want to achieve as well for ourselves and for the areas that we're working in. How we can invest better in gender equity at organisational level, at industry level, and individual level, as well as being a huge asset to our organisations, an asset to our friends, an asset to other underrepresented communities as allies as well, to make for a more inclusive 2024. Thank you again, Laura and Jan.
Thank you.
And do look out for the next Inspired Live in the series, which will be on the 25th of April, that's a Thursday at 1 p.m, where we will celebrate diversity and the amazing diversity that makes our industry better, what we can do to increase diversity. We will be joined by two super panelists, Sanju De Silva, MD of Sweet Cherry Publishing, and Remy Weston, Director at Ingram Publisher Services UK. Look out across our LinkedIn page for details on how to access that, and see you all there. For now, happy International Women's Day. Thank you very much.
Happy International Women's Day. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And lovely to see you again, Jan.
Oh, it's so good to see you too, Lauren.
Thank you.